Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, they own our online data and websites as well. And so have tech corporations taken over the internet too? We'll look at who's controlling the future of cyberspace and what that means for how much freedom we have online. Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback. We always ask our audience questions to get them galvanized for the conversation. So what did we ask them for today's program?
Well, to get the conversation started, we asked who they think controls the internet, and we got several responses. This one is interesting. Patrick says the internet is mainly controlled by tech corporations. Netizens just use what's allowed by the tech companies. Now, for those of you at home, we want to know what you think as well. Who controls the internet? Let us know with the hashtag AJStream.
You've already spotted him. He's sitting in the studio between Malika and myself, and he is Suhail Khan. And Suhail is a board member at the American Conservative Union. He is also Director of External Affairs at Microsoft, but he is here with us in a personal capacity, and his views do not necessarily reflect the views of Microsoft. Suhail, how was that for an awesome disclaimer?
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
It's good to have you. You'll hear more from Suhail in just a moment. So, in the early days of the internet, cyber advocates saw the web as the ultimate public forum, a democratic medium that would serve the greater good. But some critics look at today's internet and see it just as a market for profits. So if you look at the world's top 50 websites, all of them are run by private corporations with one exception, and that's Wikipedia, which is funded through a non-profit foundation. So, who's controlling the future of the internet? Is it netizens or the corporations who own their email accounts? So here to discuss this is Robert McChesney. He's a media reform advocate and professor at the University of Illinois. He's also the author of a new book called Digital Disconnect: How Capitalism is Turning the Internet Against Democracy. And in Tallinn, Estonia, we have Linar Levik. He is a lecturer at the Estonian IT College. He's also credited with linking public and private sectors to develop Estonia's groundbreaking e-governance system. So Linar and Robert and Suhail, it's great to have all of you here in the stream. I'm going to start with Linar, because what Estonia has done is nothing short of amazing as far as internet is concerned. Linar, you're known as Estonia's internet guru, and when I started to read up about what you've been doing in Estonia over the last few years or so, it's like internet utopia. Can you give us a few highlights about what's special about the way Estonia uses the internet?
Estonia is a small country, size in terms of square miles, a bit bigger than a Maryland state. It's 1.3 million inhabitants. Almost 80% of people use internet. Estonia as a country is covered with parallel wireless, mobile, 3 different data networks. Vast majority of people have access to the internet in public access points. All kids in schools have been using internet already for the last 10 years. And 95.7% of all Estonians have declared their taxes over internet. Companies can be established in 15 minutes over internet. People participate in electronic voting since 2007, and almost 90% of the citizens of the country have digital ID cards, which gives them an access to electronic authentication, digital signature infrastructure, which is an equally valid as signed on paper signature, and everybody's using electronic banking. We have never ever seen in our life single bank check.
Wow, that is extraordinary. I am going to show our audience at home how you iVote in Estonia, because you gave us such an incredible list. I actually want to just pause and show people how you do it. So think about a presidential election. Think about this as a possible way that you could vote. This is how they do it in Estonia. Look at this.
I'm going to vote for the Estonian parliament from my home environment. To identify my person, I need to plug my ID card with my laptop. And now it asks the PIN code for the authentication. And then I have available to see the list of candidates. So I pick my favorite candidate and select, and it asks the PIN code number 2 for the digital signature to sign the ballot. I'm done. I can vote as many times we like. The last vote counts. The last vote will cancel all the previous votes. Thank you.
Can you imagine the last elections where there were all of those lines in the United States, Suhail, and people could have actually sat on their laptop, changed their mind 10 times and then just voted? Is that remarkable?
That'd be great. And go shopping at the same time.
Are you jealous about what Estonia is doing right now?
I think it's great. I think it's fabulous.
Our community thinks it's great too. We got a couple of tweets from people who've been there and love it. Agano says Estonia, as he calls it, has been setting the pace for a long time now. Camped through the country in 2006. There was internet everywhere and broadband. But Robert, there's a tweet here that I'm going to direct to you. Mustafa says, I've been to Estonia back in 2010. Everyone joked that internet access was like a constitutional right. But often, internet isn't seen as a right, it's seen as a luxury. Should it be?
Should it be a luxury or should it be a right?
You tell us.
You know, I think that we're at a point now where effective citizenship in the United States involves having broadband access, and probably that's true in any country in the world. So policies that make that readily available at a reasonable price, I think, are very important. And that's one of the great tragedies in the United States, is that due to some policy decisions, not market decisions made at the Federal Communications Commission 10 years ago, we've allowed our internet service provision to go from being a very competitive industry in the 1990s to being a highly concentrated monopolistic industry today for both cell phones and for broadband wireline ISPs. There's only a handful of companies that dominate the market. And as a result, we pay much more than people do in most other countries for much worse service. It's classically what you get in a monopoly or cartel situation. And as a result, we look at other countries like Estonia and most European and East Asian countries enviously for the quality of internet access they get at the prices they pay.
So Suhail, do you see the internet in that way, as a few companies, a big corporations dominating the internet?
I think if you take a snapshot look, then sometimes that might be what appear to be the case. But really, as we stated on the beginning of the show, there's a technological revolution that's happening right now, and things change. The dominant players from 10, 15 years ago go by the wayside oftentimes in a few short years. Companies like Facebook and Google and others were not even heard of just a few short years ago, and now they're dominant. And who knows what will happen. I think there should be as less government regulation as possible to allow the market to decide winners and losers.
See, I'm looking here at the top 500 sites on the web around the whole world. So we've got at number one, Facebook, then we go down to Google and YouTube and Yahoo, Amazon.com, Baidu.com, which is the Chinese language search engine, don't need to tell you that. And then finally, Wikipedia is where, okay, the people have a say here. Number 7, but most of these companies are huge corporations and dominating over the whole world. Sometimes domination feels like maybe that's a problem, but you don't see that in that way?
Well, because I don't draw a distinction between corporations and people. Because
okay, I've heard that before.
Who are the customers of those corporations? It's the people.
Right.
And the corporations are responsive to their customers. And so whatever the customers demand, the corporations will provide in services and other types of goods that they are asking for. And they want to compete to have that provided not only for their customers in an efficient manner, but in the lowest price possible.
Sure. Robert?
Well, the point I was making specifically was about internet service provision, the ability to get access to the internet, to answer your original question. And that was referring to Verizon, Comcast, and AT&T, the companies that have a virtual cartel over internet service access in the United States with 2 or 3 other smaller players. And these companies, to be clear, these are not free market success stories. These companies' entire history is predicated on getting monopoly franchises from the government, having world-class lobbyists. I mean, they blanket Washington, D.C. and state capitals with lobbyists to create monopoly markets around government-created monopoly franchises. So I think when we look at the internet, we shouldn't be looking at it like there's the private sector on one side that does all the innovation and all the work, and on the other side, there's this evil government that gets in the way and gunks up the process with its regulations. The government and the corporations are joined at the hip. They're very much in partnership, and 98% of all the issues the government deals with. In all foreign policy issues, the U.S. government is an advance army for these corporations, including the ones Suhail works for. It's very much its advocate. And so I think the more accurate framing of the relationship of the government to these giant corporations is one of tremendous collaboration, and one in which the large corporations know full well their survival and existence is dependent on the state's role in maintaining it and protecting it.
So Robert, people are listening to this and saying, okay, but I'm just going online, Robert. What are you trying to say here? The average everyday, I understand that. The everyday average users, like, why should I mind that this is a problem, or is it a problem?
Well, that's a good question, and I think to a lot of people it isn't a problem. You go about your day and you accept, you turn on your computer, your smartphone, your tablet, and what you see is what you get, and you think everything's fine. And I think that's the role of scholars and journalists is to have shows like this and to say, well, let's think a little harder about this. I mean, what's happened with the commercialization of the internet, among other things, is that in some respects it's been turned on its head in the past 2 decades. 2 decades ago, and I was there at the beginning, the internet was seen as something that was going to provide this immense opportunity for people to be egalitarian and share access to the world's treasure trove of culture, and to participate equally and anonymously if you so desired. Well, commercially, what's happened in the internet is we've turned that on its head. Now privacy has pretty much been eliminated online. Everything we do online is more or less kept track of by these large firms because that's where the money is. The more they know about us, the easier it is to sell us stuff. And as a result, it's the world we get online is not this anonymous giant treasure that we go to and we can go in and see it as we wish, but it's a world that's constructed for us by commercial interests. So we see what they think is most profitable for them. And it's a very different world. And I think that it has tremendous implications for our journalism, for our culture, and some of which are very negative. For starters, and I think this is a point that is not fully appreciated outside of news media, the way advertising is changing as we go online to what's called smart advertising, where instead of purchasing advertisements on a website like you used to do in a newspaper or a magazine or on a TV channel, instead of doing that, but actually just purchasing the target customer you want.
Yeah, we did that show a couple of weeks ago. It's pretty amazing to see who was lurking around you being online as they were bidding for you as a potential customer. Let me bring Linar back.
The consequence of this, and this is the crucial point I'm trying to get at.
Okay, I want to bring Linar back in. Yeah,
please do. The consequence of this is that the traditional revenue that went from advertising to support content creation, especially journalism, has disappeared. And it means that the commercial basis of journalism in the United States is disintegrating before our eyes, and there's nothing on the horizon to replace it. And I just want to point out that our whole constitutional system is predicated on the idea of there being a healthy, vibrant fourth estate. And right now we are in a situation where we're almost on the verge of seeing a non-existent fourth estate.
Linar, is this even a tension or a point of contention in Estonia? You seem so incredibly comfortable with how internet is woven into your everyday lives.
It is certainly a role for a government, but especially the government needs to have not a focus on the corporations' development and corporate interests, however, a broader social interest and agenda for the country. And it has been really the case. The way how Estonian government throughout the regulation and also vast majority of European governments have forced private companies, private telecommunication companies to deliver internet access also to rural areas with affordable price is by establishing certain licensing conditions and countrywide regulations. It can be, of course, much easier in smaller countries. However, if we take a look right now around the bigger picture in the globe, there are roughly around 2.5 billion internet users. And over 50% of them are right now already in Asia. Vast majority of internet users are in China who even don't know how really the free and open internet looks like. United States represent right now around 10% of internet users. However, yes, when you take a look to the top 50 of the websites, vast majority of them are operated by American corporations. The most recent concerns, what we have recognized in Estonia and also in Europe, are really related to the way how companies beyond our national agendas and beyond our jurisdictions are operating the personal information related to the privacy of our citizens under the jurisdiction of a different country. In that case, for example, in the United States or in Chinese or in Russian or any other government which we can't really do anything about.
Okay. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned agendas, and our community seems to think that corporations often have an agenda that's not in our interest. Abdul Karim says the internet has been taken over by large corporations, so users really have no control. And Suhail, another one from Jamalu, who says, this worries me. The internet is evolving into a private sector space that's primarily accountable to corporate shareholders. Now, I'm going to venture out and say that doesn't worry you, and you don't agree with that, but tell us why.
I don't worry about that, Malika, for a couple of reasons. First, those shareholders are us. And I don't want to draw distinctions between companies, corporations, and people, because they're the same. People own those corporations. Shareholders are the ones that hold those corporations accountable. And I think, going back to what some of the comments the professor was making, the concerns seem to be partly with the internet and the quote-unquote who is controlling the internet, and the US and other corporations having a large segment of that quote-unquote control. But really, it seems to be a concern with capitalism itself. What I would posit to my friends is that capitalism has done more to unleash information and to bring people out of poverty than any other force known to man in history. We talked about China just recently. Over 400 million people have been lifted out of poverty due to capitalism. So capitalism is not a boogie word or a bad term. Corporations are not necessarily bad things. People willingly go to these websites to get things that make our lives better. And so to draw this artificial distinction between people and corporations and shareholders as somehow being nefarious and controlling our lives, I think is really one that is not based on fact.
If we look ahead into the future, Linar, and then we're also thinking about cyberspace and who's developing the internet as we go forward. You've done an amazing amount in Estonia, but do you feel it's going to be about private-public partnerships, or do you think private will lead the way? It's so dominant right now.
I still consider the private-public partnership as only sustainable model for the development of the future. The entrepreneurship, the accumulation of new ideas into the entrepreneurial models in broad, not over-regulated government regulatory environment, which is also set down by a vision supported strongly by society. This is a way forward. And I'm not so much worried about present top 50 of the global websites, because I see a huge diversification of the content providers, the service providers. I can count that in my small own village nearby Tallinn, capital city, we have a number of small service providers, both telecommunication but also content service providers, which make sense for daily living, for the public transportation, for the local utilities, for the local bookstore, for the local restaurant, and they are also content service providers. They all can benefit of the internet. They all can use internet as a platform, and they have been bending the internet to the core of their business models.
This might not be a mass known fact, but I'm sure everybody in Estonia knows this. You're speaking to us via Skype, and Skype was invented in Estonia, right, Linar?
Yes.
Was it a private-public partnership that made Skype happen?
No. Skype was an entirely private company.
Okay.
And from the day one, it was very clearly dedicated to kind of unleash the global telecommunication markets barriers, which are artificially built around, and kind of free calls to everybody used to be a very early and great slogan for Skype, and right now we can say that Skype is already over well over 40% of the global long distance calls made, and I think it's a total monopoly on the video calls, as we can enjoy also during your show, free for everybody.
All right, that's the end of the advert, and here comes Malika once more.
Well, Robert, I want to get you in here because I just heard the word monopoly again, and of course you raised it first. There's a video comment here. Have a listen to it. Let me know what you think after.
Daniel Stuckey of Vice Motherboard. Now, I think that we continuously use this word democracy, and I think it's a wrong use. I don't really think that's what we're protecting when we talk about the internet. We certainly like to see things on the internet, websites on the internet that mimic or display our thoughts, our reflections on democracy. but it's not really what the internet does or is made of. The internet is a chaotic place. It's a free-for-all, and that's where a lot of these innovators and success stories have come from, is chaos and anarchy.
So, Robert, is that chaos being threatened by what you call monopolies?
Well, I think the more important question, the broad question here, and where the term democracy applies, is that the question is the internet contributing to making the world a more democratic place, with the assumption that democracy is a good thing, that freedom, elections, rule of law is a good thing. And that's what the issue I take up in my book. And that's really, I think, if the internet's contributing to a vibrant democracy, then I think whatever institutions are on it that are contributing to that are probably doing a pretty good job, or at least you'd start from that assumption. And what I would argue, and I think the evidence is clear, is that capitalism does not work necessarily in the way as presented earlier. I think that catechism, as I call it in the book, that corporations are people in the interest of Walmart and the Koch brothers and Google are identical to the interest of any person who cleans the latrines on the graveyard shift, just really doesn't cut it. I think that if you look at democracy and what makes a great democracy, the two things that are crucial. One is as little inequality as possible. You want the less economic.
And what's the second one? What's the second one, Robert? Because I'm heading into something else we have to do on the program. So give me the second one very quickly, so we don't leave our audience hanging, because we're almost at the end of the show.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. You do whatever you want.
All right, we'll come back to you. Okay, that's a tease. What was the second one? We will find out in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Sahil is holding his breath with anticipation. Meanwhile, Malika is standing by with some of the other stories that we're following on the stream.
We start in Turkey, where a slain protester is becoming the global face of the country's demonstrations. The name Ali Ismail Korkmaz began trending worldwide after his death Wednesday morning. He was beaten by an unidentified group while attempting to escape police during the height of Turkey's anti-government demonstrations. He later spent 38 days in a coma. Images of Ali were widely shared, along with tweets written in his voice. Yilmaz writes, "My name is Ali, 19 years old, beaten to death. Who killed me?" Large crowds spilled onto the streets for his funeral, while others marked his death with marches against alleged police brutality. Our next leads out of California, where nearly 30,000 prisoners are staging what could be the largest hunger strike in the U.S. state's history. California's inmates spend years or even decades in solitary confinement. Amnesty International says no other U.S. state is believed to hold so many prisoners for so long in this way. Well, strikers and their families are demanding an end to indefinite solitary confinement. Take a look.
The last time I was able to touch my brother was in 1982.
The state says keeping them in isolation breaks up prison gangs, but prisoners say it amounts to torture. One prisoner at the Pelican Bay State Prison wrote, "Before this, I only had a vague idea what mental torture might be like. Now I know it's 10 times worse than I imagined." Well, from Pelican Bay to Palestine, social media has been an engine of solidarity for hunger strikers around the world. Lubna tweets, "From Palestine to California, prisoners are fighting with the little they have for the basics of dignity. Support them." Well, there's much more on the hunger strike on our website, so check it out at stream.aljazeera.com. Femi?
Thanks, Malika. We always quiz our guests on their digital life. And Suhail, you have a pretty impressive digital life. What's your newest gadget that you have right now?
Well, I got the new Windows phone, the Nokia. I'm definitely enjoying it because it's for social media. It ties everything in.
And in what way? Does everything link up?
Everything's linked up. You know,
Right.
you just look up. If I look up Malika's name, I can get her Facebook, her Twitter, her LinkedIn, everything all at once. Send her an email, tweet at her, and it's just at one touch. So it's a lot of fun.
Do you know how to turn it off yet?
No, that's hard. I need help with that.
Excellent. Okay, so what are we doing on the next show? On Thursday's show, a pregnant 11-year-old in Chile is creating some fierce debate. If she has the baby, she could die, but abortion is illegal in Chile. So we'll take a look at how Latin America is handling this issue. So that's in the next AJ stream. Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com, and you will find out about Robert McChesney's cliffhanger. You know where we'll be? Online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show, and we're talking about the dominant role that for-profit companies have online and whether it benefits or hurts internet freedom. With us today in our studio, we have Suhail Khan of the American Conservative Union. On Skype in Madison, Wisconsin, Robert McChesney. He's the author of the book Digital Disconnect, and on Skype in Tallinn, Estonia, Linar Vik. He is a lecturer at the Estonian IT College. Let's get back to the conversation. Robert, I apologise. I know you've done your own media show, so you know what a hard count is and a hard post is. So we left our audience hanging. You gave us 1 point. Can you give us the second point with a quick recap?
Well, simply that democracy is undermined by economic inequality, and it's undermined by monopoly. If there's too much concentrated economic power in few hands. And during the era of the internet, economic inequality has grown dramatically in the United States. It hasn't reversed. And secondly, monopoly has grown. The strength of the largest companies has grown. And indeed today, 12 of the 30 most valuable American publicly traded firms are internet companies, most of which, like Microsoft and Google and Apple and Amazon, have what economists would call a monopoly in their core market. The internet, if anything, is the greatest generator of economic monopoly of any institution in human history. So just at that level, this should raise some alarm bells for people who genuinely want a democratic society.
Suhail, do you have a rebuttal to that at all?
Well, I sure do, because the question is really then, because some companies have been thought up by people, innovators in garages or in college dorm rooms, and now have become publicly traded companies and have created a lot of wealth. You know, I come from the Silicon Valley, and we have lots of new millionaires and billionaires. That's a good thing. I don't see it as a bad thing. It's not driving poverty. It's not making people poor. It's making people wealthier. And that's an important distinction to make. Mm-hmm. So these questions about economic inequality are important ones, but the solutions make me nervous, because what I hear in some of those concerns is attempts to try to push down those that want to innovate. And innovation is driven by the idea that you can make a company, that you can have a profit, and you can be rewarded for your success. And I think that's a positive thing.
You actually brought up a phrase, economic inequality, and one of the things we felt was really important in this conversation was the digital divide. Right. And so we spoke to Michael Beckerman. He's the president and CEO of the Internet Association. We asked him about the digital divide, and this is what he told us just about an hour or two ago. Have a listen to this.
Yeah, bridging the digital divide is a very important issue, and the members of the Internet Association have been very active in building out networks where they can. I mean, Google has been a great example of building out fiber and even deploying Wi-Fi to underserved areas of the world with balloons and everything else. And so, again, for our companies, it is a huge priority to make sure that the digital divide is narrowed and that every single person, regardless of economic circumstances or where they live around the world, has access to the internet.
Malika, some of our online community were talking about digital divide as well.
Exactly, and because they were, I pulled up this video, which is provided by Google, as was just mentioned in the video comment that you played. This is Project Loon, and this is the technology. He mentioned the balloon that's taking the internet to places that it wasn't before. And Robert, as we're seeing this, we're seeing what appears to be a good thing. Tell us why you think it's not, if you do.
Well, the digital balloon, I can't see it, so
You can't see the balloon, but the point of the balloon is that it's a Google project taking the internet to places where the internet previously was not.
Well, I'm in no position to judge the Google balloon, and the point I think is interesting as the Google balloon is, there's really a big picture of fundamental questions. We're in a situation in the United States where these giant corporations, which are enormous, have immense lobbying power to hire people like the other guest and countless others to help influence government policy. And they do have interests that are different than the rest of us. They aren't charities. They're out to make as much money as possible. They have great interest in not paying taxes. So these companies, as a rule, pay far lower taxes than other firms because they successfully can rig the system to funnel money offshore. They have great interest in not having labor unions, so they tend to be companies that are very hostile to having labor unions, like other large companies. These are very important issues for the regular rank and file Americans who have to pay their taxes and who have declining living standards and little control over their workplace.
Right.
I think that these issues are really impossible to segregate with just sort of a fairy tale story about heroic entrepreneurs who are making $1 billion in California. Congratulations to them. But one other point on this. we've had great entrepreneurs throughout American history. They didn't all have to end up with monopolies. It's not a credit to you that you get a monopoly, you've earned it. There were great entrepreneurs who only ended up with 5% market share, had brilliant ideas. A monopoly is not just due to some brilliant great entrepreneurs, it's due to other factors. And in the internet, the technology of networks tends to promote monopoly, and that's something that should concern us.
So Suhail, I know you're not talking about the company that you work for, so you're here with your personal views, but the two are slightly connected, so I'm just interested to hear.
Again, I see what I hear from the professor is really just an assault on capitalism, on the ability to make money, to innovate. That is not a bad thing. I mean, there's no coincidence that our guest from Estonia is talking about internet access in a country that is wired and people are making their everyday lives better through the use of the internet that used to be a communist country. And that is because they've learned the lessons of what our friend from Wisconsin is trying to push, and that is trying to force equality, trying to punish success, punish innovation, and really prevent people from enjoying the fruits of their success and giving customers what they want.
See, I see Robert kind of scratching his head and rubbing his collar, getting hot under the collar. Robert, I'm just going to leave you to stew a little bit because I want to go back to Lenar. Lenar, what I find fascinating about the story about Estonia and the internet was it was your politicians who were pretty much the millennials of their day who said, let's get the internet into Estonia. And at the time, less than half of the population even had a landline, let alone a laptop or a computer. So do you feel that it's a political reason that Estonia has got on so well, or has politics got nothing to do with it?
It was certainly a number of issues which happened in the parallel time. We did not know that the internet will be so big, but it was affordable, it worked, it was free, and we had a quick learning curve how to install and deploy. So it was obviously a first data communication infrastructure deployed by Estonian government for the government use, but not only for government use, also for the broader use. We also got our independence at a time when the old mainframe architecture was shifted to the PC architecture. We had our first generation of independent Estonian politicians wise enough to have also ears. Often politicians resemble me Lego minifigures. They have mouth, they have nose, they have eyes, but they never have ears. But our early politicians, they also had ears, so they listened, advisors and other peoples with opinion, and that led towards an immediate, as quickly as possible, liberalization of telecommunication market. Many efforts put to incorporate the innovation into the everyday core of the business and support really the entrepreneurship and innovation.
So Lenar, let me just ask you very quickly because we're almost out of time. Just very quickly. So now that they're getting old, are they still listening as well?
Well, it seems because at least right now the development agenda for the country still is very progressive, and when I took a look what are we going to expect in year 2020, it's certainly a still free, secure and for all people internet what we are going to have in Estonia.
Wow. I actually did search for flights from DC to Estonia because I want to be able to go for 100 miles in any direction and have free Wi-Fi. So Lenar, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing a little bit of Estonia and their way they use the internet onto the program. Robert McChesney, it's been great to have you, and also Suhail Khan as well, been great to have you. I have a feeling that Robert and Suhail will never agree on this subject, but it's been really fascinating hearing your different perspectives. Malika, do we have a last word from the community?
Well, speaking of never agreeing, I guess I should give you two last words. Ian says, the internet thankfully provides for nearly infinite choice. Consumers punish evil internet companies by voting with their feet. Exactly. On the other hand, someone who doesn't agree with you.
Not so fast, Suhail.
Typically, U.S. consumers can only choose between 2 or 3 internet providers who collaborate to have similar policies.
Oh, okay. This discussion is not over, but it's over right now, right here. Let me talk about tomorrow's program. A pregnant 11-year-old in Chile is creating some very fierce debate. Now, if she has her baby, she could die, but abortion is illegal in Chile. So we'll take a look at how Latin America is handling this issue. So that's for another day, another show. But right now, you know where we will always be at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks so much for watching.